you so much everyone for coming today to this conference and to my presentation. My name is Klara Wojtkowska in this context. I'm also Klara Ana Rosa, I'm also MaSibanda. It says here that I'm at the University of Zimbabwe. I was at the University of Zimbabwe. I'm currently doing my doctorate through the University of South Africa. So I was a faculty member at the University of Zimbabwe for the duration of a grant period of a grant. So the presentation that I'm doing today is part of my doctoral thesis, which I'm currently writing. My thesis advisor is the amazing Nokuthula Hlabangane at the University of South Africa. So this presentation is also, I do welcome comments. It's interesting because the title of the presentation says Star Mythologies from Southern Africa, a modern exploration. Why modern? What does that even mean when we talk about stars? And that brings us to the first questions that stars ask of us as human beings and what they tell us when they show up in any kind of mythology, which is the question of time. When we speak of star mythologies, we are usually speaking of very long stretches of time. We are talking about calendars that human beings have kept, that from our perspective, when I say our perspective, I mean a certain kind of modern civilization that says that the only utility for time is work, for example. That time is something that is linear, time is something that is outside of us, time is something that is measured by clocks, and that time is, it's other kinds of times are somehow less important to us. But then if we look at, and this is the star that is known as Sirius to us, and it poses a lot of questions for us also when it comes to time and the questions that we ask about our human history and who we actually are as human beings. So in the last presentation when we talked about decolonization, what actually it is, decolonization, the process that I'm going to be talking about is a process of spiritual decolonization. Spiritual decolonization, because when we look at Southern Africa, when we look at the people of Southern Africa, and when we look at the ways in which knowledge is respected within, we could say those cultures, but we could also say it's a very human thing, the way that knowledge comes to us. It is also a spiritual reality. So, for example, when we talk about in Zimbabwe, in Shona culture, we have the Mashikiro. The Mashikiro are the spirit mediums, we could say, loosely translated in English, the spirit mediums. In Shona, we say Homwene Shikiro, a pocket for a spirit. And there's no really set agreement about the fact that one person is a pocket for a spirit and another one isn't. The idea is that all human beings on some level are pockets for spirits, and that throughout, that there are certain informations, certain knowledges that can only come to us from the spirit, and that it is important then to respect them as part of this body of knowledge that human beings have. So in terms of my research, which started with star mythologies and took me to Great Zimbabwe, which I have some pictures of Great Zimbabwe here also. Here is, well, we'll talk about Egypt as well. Egypt is very important. Here we have Orion, the 3 stars of the belt. And then we have, here is the temples of Great Zimbabwe, specifically the Great Enclosure. So when we, it just became kind of, the traveling from star mythologies to Great Zimbabwe. What I have been implementing, what is implemented through me is what is a spiritual methodology. This idea that in Shona culture, if we have the Mhondoro spirits, which are the great lion spirits or the great ancestral spirits, that in fact led the Revolutionary War, that in fact won the Revolutionary War. It's a well-known fact, this idea that, of course, politically speaking, then the political parties, they say we won and so on. They make it a human thing. But the fact is, who was leading people, who was leading fighters during the independence movement? It was, I guess from our perspective in English, we would say it was the shamans. It was the shamans who were saying, go here, don't go here. Do this, don't do this. This is taboo, this is the way to go. You will find these people there. If you get lost in the bush, then you will, then there will be lion spirits who will come and they will lead you, they will guide you, they will help you find your way. So when you have an independence movement that is led by that, and then you have a system of knowledge that is then imposed that says we are not allowed to treat that as official knowledge. Again, because of this colonization mentality somehow, globally speaking, then somehow there's a sense of being guided that is lost for an entire people. And that spreads for all of us. It's not just, again, certain things happen in Zimbabwe, but if we're looking at human beings in general, what does it mean to be a human being? Who has the answers for those kinds of questions? Where do we truly come from? Because the structures of Zimbabwe or Great Zimbabwe, we, in terms of in the academy, these are the second largest stone structures on the continent of Africa. Second to the Great Pyramids in Egypt. They are shrouded in mystery. The official history right now is that, well, there are several official histories, that these were, of course, they were part of the Roji Empire, they were part of 15th century, they were built then, they were so on. We focus on this recent history, but we don't acknowledge the older mysteries of this place. And arguably we do that with the entire kind of the southern Africa. When we have somebody who brings attention to these mysteries, so a major source for this history is which some of you may have heard of. I don't know if anyone here has knowledge of his books. Ndaba, My Children. Okay, so he was a Sangoma, but he was a Sanusi. He was a high Sangoma. He was Zulu. He passed away in 2021. And he told a lot of histories also about Great Zimbabwe that had to do specifically with the heavens, that had to do with the stars. So for the Zulu people, it's different linguistically, because Zulu, the word, some people say it means sky. According to Rusama Zulu Krelomutwa, it means interstellar space. It is an indication, when somebody says they are Zulu, it is an indication of a fundamental relationship with the stars, saying that is where we come from. And Krelomutwa is not the one who would say that. These days, one of the people who I've been interviewing, also for my research, Elder Patisanyati, he emphasizes that as well. It's a constant reminder of where we come from. We come from the stars. What does that mean? Is it literal? What kind of relationship does it indicate with the heavens? Why are the stars important? Why have we forgotten about them somehow? Why has it been so easy for us to forget? So when we look at Zimbabwe, when we look at this is the great enclosure. Southern Africa is full of stone structures. Lots of walls, lots of big, small houses of stone. It's all over the southern region. Kani ruins and the like. But Great Zimbabwe is unique. Near Masvingo, it's kind of in the central part. It's unique also because of the great enclosure, and this is something that Patisanyati said in one of our interviews. He said that he has been around, he's seen all of the stone structures in the area of Botswana, South Africa, Zimbabwe, even Mapungubwe, and nowhere is there a great enclosure. Nowhere is there anything like this. I think I took this picture. I'm not sure the picture is the most remarkable thing ever, but you guys should go. Then you will be more impressed. So he says, nowhere is there something like this. Why? We should be asking ourselves that question. Instead of focusing on the last 500 years, instead of asking ourselves the question of why, of how human beings constructed a certain kind of stone, we should be asking ourselves why. Why did they do that? What kind of consciousness did human beings have in their process of knowing themselves, who they are, that they said, our civilization, our people are going to do this, because this is important. So as you can see, my presentation, it's a list of questions, really. I have a lot of questions in general in life. The same thing goes for when we look at, where are they? Ah, there they are, the pyramids. Why? Why this? Of all the things you can do in life, when you wake up in the morning and you have a choice, why this? Of course, people talk about the alignment now between the three great pyramids and Orion's belt, the 3 stars of Orion's belt. Why? Why is that important for us, for human beings? Why is alignment between the heavens and the earth, and for human beings to be part of that alignment? What does it say? Is it part of our also now, as people, in this moment in time, our process of getting outside of the consciousness of our kind of, I would say, mental poverty, to be honest. To grow beyond that and to say there's something very, very important here. So traditionally speaking, when we look at stories about stars, of course in Zimbabwe, in Shona culture, we have the origin stories, we have Musikavanu. I mean, people are generally falling from the heavens. They're coming down, or God is coming down. Mwari is coming down and placing people, creating people. And then, of course, there's the story of Mwedzi, the moon, who begs Mwari, the creator, to come down and to be on earth. At which point Mwari also sends him the morning star, the evening star as his wives. So this theme that repeats not just in Zimbabwean mythology, but this is global star mythology. The theme is the stars come down to earth. And there's some work that they do here, like in the Shona stories, the origin of life. There is no life on earth without the stars coming down to earth. What is that? What is the coming down to earth? Is it consciousness? Is it literal? Is it travel? Methods of travel? Is it some? What is it really? And what is it that, again, keeps on repeating in these stories, in these themes, that tells us that human beings are not just, I don't know, this thing, the pocket, that we are something else, and that the stars somehow seem deeply involved in asking us those questions of who are you? Who are we? How are we connected? What is the light that goes on for us? You know, again, if we have the lights of the heavens, there's a story this is from South America, from the Amazon, that the Milky Way dividing the sphere of the heavens is the same as the brain being divided into 2 hemispheres, that it mirrors, that somehow the heavens and the mind, the human ability to comprehend are connected. how have we lost this? How can we regain it? Why is it that if we look at stone structures around the world right now, of which Great Zimbabwe is a very important point, and perhaps that's, if I'm to summarize my presentation in a sentence, it's that when we look at the global picture of stone structures, I have some pictures here also from, these are all Zimbabwe. Then this is Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, which is near the border with Syria, a very famous site, very old, officially very old. I believe that all of these sites are ancient, very, very, very old. I believe that we are asking ourselves the wrong questions when we look at recent history as opposed to old history. But this one is officially very old, 12,000 years. And then there's Machu Picchu, then there's Peru, there's Easter Island, there's Egypt, there's all kinds of structures, buildings, temples in Asia. And Southern Africa is missing from that picture. The spirituality that is involved with understanding these places is missing from our global conversation of spiritualities. The way in which information is communicated and comprehended and accepted in that part of the world is missing. And part of it has to do again with this spiritual decolonization process. So this is the great enclosure from the outside. And I say those things because there's some message that, from my research right now, some urgency, some message that is coming through. I see it in Southern Africa. The spiritual people who I've worked with, who I work with in the region. Everyone talks about how there's a spiritual awakening that is happening in Southern Africa. That there's something important that is happening there. That Zimbabwe is important for it, and that this place is central. That this place is connected with the stars. The way we see it also, there's a writer, his name is Cosmas Nyamutswa. He wrote a book called Who Built Great Zimbabwe and Why? I disagree with his conclusions. He comes to the conclusion that the Lemba built Great Zimbabwe, that it was a site of circumcision. I believe that the site has been used for many different things over civilizations, but I more believe Vusamazulu Credo Mutwa when he talked about the various humanities that passed through the place. But Cosmas Nyamutswa made a very important observation. He's a pilot, actually. And so he used to do tourist flights above Masvingo, above Great Zimbabwe. And he noticed that the great enclosure from above looks like a womb with a baby inside of it. And that this can only be seen from above, from the heavens. Like if you are familiar with the Nazca lines in Peru, the questions that we are asked when we see a phenomenon, something built by people that can only be seen from above. The question is, again, why is that relationship, aesthetic, energetic, alignment-wise, with the heavens so important? And so Patti Sanyati has also noted that, according to him, all of the symbology around the great enclosure is about female fertility. So this again tells us about a time, about something to do with, again, when we think of fertility, we think of life, something to do with life, which takes us back to these mythologies of, again, life comes from this connection of the stars, of the heavens and the earth. Our ability to truly live, our ability to propagate life comes from that, and not just our human ability, but the ability of other beings. So in terms of the spiritual methodology, why is it also important for us to implement? There's the lion head. So Credo Mutua, Vusamazulu Credo Mutua was the one who spoke about the so-called Lion Meridian, the meridian that cuts through the continent of Africa, that connects Great Zimbabwe and the pyramids. Exactly. And then Linda Tucker, in her work with the White Lions, she wrote about this, and she also wrote about how then that meridian goes down all the way to Timbavati in South Africa, where the White Lions first appeared. And this is quite interesting, because if you follow that meridian up north, it goes through Turkey, and then it also goes through Ukraine and Russia. There's something about, again, these energetic ley lines, that these portals, places that then human beings come to, and human beings either they build their temples there, they honor in some way, but with the understanding that the power of the place comes not from what human beings have done there, but from the place originally. Again, a place that is a place of relationship between the stars and the earth. So I say that because the Sphinx, again, emphasizes this lion theme. Lots of lions. The spiritual methodology is important, because spiritual methodology changes our concept of time. When you go to visit a Svikiro, in Shona culture, it's a very mediumistic culture. We don't necessarily throw bones as often as the other, let's say, nations of southern Africa. I always laugh. Sorry, I live in a shamanic bubble, so I always laugh that these people, kind of the discussions that we have, where there's this, the Mashikiro are like, if you need bones, then the spirit is not. It's not quite well connected, because the pure spirit, it doesn't need any tools. So people have these kinds of discussions. I really enjoy these kinds of discussions. It also shows that there's a culture of questions and experiences and vitality that's alive. So when you go to a Svikiro, the spirit of the ancestor comes, and the ancestor tells their story, but not only their story, because they have access to the past within the so-called dare. The dare is the space where the Svikiro is, where the ceremonies or the rituals happen. The past, the present, and the future are all one. They become one point. Because presumably you also go there, the Svikiro can tell you, that this will happen in your future, this will happen in your future. This is where you come from, this is in your past, and then now let me tell you my past. And when you go, when we speak about the Mhondoro spirits, the ancient ancestors who are no longer less interested in individual humans, they are more interested in the larger movements of the nation. And they can say, these people, this group came from here, this happened, this is how many worlds we have cycled through in this place. And they say that in present time, they talk about that deep past. So in my research, in my methodology, I think my advisor is, she loves my methodology. I think she finds it the most interesting part of my thesis. But there's also that question of the collapsing of time, and the collapsing of time into that ancient past that actually becomes the present in some way also. Because within the spiritual paradigm, you can change the future by changing the past. And you change the past by becoming conscious of the past in a way that you were not conscious of it before. A good example of this is, let's go back. This is, I know, again, Zimbabwe, Egypt, connections and all that kind of thing. All the spiritual people talk about it, I guess. But the reason I go back to Egypt is that for me it's a mental exercise. When we look at the pyramids and we think about the first kind of people with a European mentality who came and who saw these structures that we know of, granted, and who assumed immediately there must be gold inside. And because there must be gold inside, the first logical thing to do is to make a hole inside of the thing so that we can get the gold out. It's logical, according to that thinking. So they made a big hole, and they went inside, and there was no gold. There was nothing, actually, inside of these three pyramids. I'm not talking about the other ones, these three. And they said, well, it must have been stolen. And that was the assumption. And then at some point, this is 21st century, the consciousness started changing so that people stopped looking at these things and saying, there must have been gold inside. Now they started measuring that. And they started saying, but this is in this point on Earth. This measurement tells us about the circumference of the Earth. It tells us about the speed of light. It tells us also the shadows indicate the equinoxes and the solstices. Look, they're connected with Orion. Those are all thoughts that human beings had that caused them to take different actions in relationship to what is really a message from the past. And because now they ask themselves those different questions, suddenly our entire vision of our human past is different. Because it's no longer a past where human beings have been obsessed with gold and where to put it. It's a past where human beings have been obsessed with sending information into the future about the stars, about our relationship with the heavens, about mathematics, about our abilities, our human abilities. And those are our ancestors, not the ones who were, again, obsessed with putting a bunch of gold into a treasure box and then throwing it in the desert. And that changes our concept of what we are capable of in the future. So again, in terms of this spiritual methodology, I would just highly recommend that we kind of change our thinking when it comes to all those things. I think I'm nearly out of time. Yes, and I know these are a lot of thoughts, but I suppose maybe I'll open the floor for any comments, questions, discussions. Thank you so much for your patience. This is also the Great Zimbabwe Hill. This is one of the Zimbabwe birds. More Zimbabwe. This is the Great Enclosure. The Great Enclosure, So we've gone through these pictures. Let's go back to serious. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. So you can ask questions if you want, or points of discussion.
Okay, so maybe I will start.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's not technically a question connected to your way of your research,
mm-hmm.
but if we think about changing, like humankind, changing perspectives or the way of thinking, it's more a question of your personal opinion. Do you think it's happening kind of sinusoidal, or maybe we are moving from one option to another on the spectrum, or maybe in a different shape?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and I do ask myself that question as well, because especially when it comes to when we look at star mythologies globally, there seems to be a theme. The most famous one is from the Vedas and from Vedic culture, that we are within these yuga cycles, that they have to do with longer stretches of time, and that the collapse of human consciousness is something that happens cyclically, that it goes up, down, up, down. However, there are other theories, because they have to do with the relationship of our sun with other stars. So that's where astronomy comes in, where again we have these very interesting changes. I mean, astronomy is changing, our knowledge is changing very, very fast. So this idea that before this, there was this idea that a binary or triple system was rare. But now it seems that most stars are part of binary or triple systems, that stars are actually all in relationship to one another. And so when we look at the star Sirius, for example, this is a big one in Zimbabwe as well, that somehow human consciousness is connected to the relationship of this star with our sun. And that has to do, and then there's another theory as well, which is that this whole thing of why did these people build temples? Why are we, when I say why, it's like...
What was the reason or purpose?
This idea that actually we also influence the heavens, and the heavens influences us. As above, so below, as below, so above. And so because of that, our activities, our choices in the matter also, they matter. They matter. So that it's not just we're going to get enlightened and then we're going to forget everything again. It's not just that. There's another story. So thank you for your comment.
That's very interesting too.
Yeah, thank you for a very, very, very good presentation. Yeah, your presentation reminds me of, if you've ever heard of Professor called Professor Hlabangane from University of Warszawa.
I know him personally.
Yes. Yeah, where he was looking into the issues of witchcraft and things like this. I think it's more of a comment. You realize that in Zimbabwe of late, the new political administration by the current president, there's a lot of issues of renaming and statues, installations, and those cultural, spiritual ceremonies,
Yes.
and the religion itself, so that those are secret gatherings where they go for, what do you call that? Where you go there, they appease your sister, something.
The Bira.
Yeah, the Bira, yes. Yes, the Bira, so that the vice president, last people was appeased homestead, was in the, yeah. This is after 40 years of independence, right? That was not happening previously before. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to say, yeah, that's very true that there's some spiritual awakening that is actually happening. Okay, awakening that is actually happening in that area of Zimbabwe. I support that, yeah, because it's actually happening. And I don't know, maybe I don't know what's the explanation. Maybe can get more on that issue of explaining why. Even now, you can look at these issues of mind. So I wish I think all of us. The way it is trending, even among the youth, like people now, they want to try to go back and try to appease their ancestors. There's a lot of things happening in terms of spirituality, in terms of late in Zimbabwe.
Yes.
Yes. There's a lot. People now they are saying, no, Christianity is not. There's something that's wrong about it. This is that's why you lost focus in terms of our life, maybe it's because of we need to go back to our roots. So I think that was so I want to find out, like, why is it now, even the leadership, even the youth, different people, they're practicing that either way.
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know, I just want maybe enlightenment of that aspect. Why is it now it's happening? It was not been happening all along. People have been attached to Christianity for a long time.
Yes, they have been. And of course, in Zimbabwe it teaches us very much that there are the official stories and there are all of the unofficial stories that tell us different versions of exactly what you're talking about. Because it's very true. And I think it's a global phenomenon. I think COVID changed a lot. I see it in Zimbabwe. Before I left Zimbabwe, before COVID, this is more of a personal observation. Because I was initiating, I was into plants and all of that kind of thing. And then people were more scared. And then I come back, and even me just talking about something as simple as Zumbani and Mufandi Chimuka and whatever, it's just list, it's, but my pastor says that, good Christians take pills or whatever. I come back after COVID. Everyone is taking Zumbani. Everyone is taking, Mufandi Chimuka. Everyone is, but I have my special mixes and I have my this and I have my beads and I have my, machira and all the things and the manjuzu. And so, of course, we can be cynical about it. Some people are. They say, but this isn't real. This is just people. This is a trend. This is trending or whatever. But I really feel that spiritually speaking, even if a person who initially wakes up doesn't necessarily behave in a very enlightened way, it's still the spirit who is trying to communicate something. So when we look at, in Zimbabwe specifically, the leadership is doing these ceremonies and so on, I won't comment on that necessarily, because the Mhondoro spirits who led the liberation struggle backed away after independence. And I think most Zimbabweans, again, when we talk about the conversations that are happening internally, are asking why. The feeling is we have been abandoned. There's something that's gone wrong. Which ceremonies were not done, or which bad ceremonies were done for certain specific people to be able to take the gold, or to treat it as, their own personal gig. Because within the world of spirituality, we have good Mhondoro spirits who think about the collective, and then we have a lot of spirits that are selfish. They're just thinking about themselves, How do I make this my agenda? So I think I'm less interested in kind of why this is happening now, because to me it's just the truth that is coming out. And I'm more interested in which ceremonies are being done for what purpose, where, why is it that certain places like Great Zimbabwe are restricted to, for example, only the leadership, which genuine spirits are trying to do good work, and in conclusion, doesn't this lead to, again, a spiritual decolonization from which everything else will flow? The abundance, the languages, the knowledge of self, the understanding this is who I am in the world. I am, essentially a homo shikiro, right? I am a spirit who is here to be itself, not to pretend to be anything else. And all of that weird confusion is going to go away. So that's my theory. Yes?
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. I'm so much interested in the spiritual methodology. It's a very unique kind of research methodology. But maybe in the context of where your study is taking, maybe from Professor Hlabangane experiences when he was studying witchcraft and how it is done differently. There's an element of participatory observation whereby the researcher himself is ready to take part in the practice. Like Professor Hlabangane had some experiences of him explaining how he would go to the graves at night, magically open the graves with the witchcrafts, how they could check everything, all those things. So the findings of Professor Hlabangane were so scary, to the extent that they were castigated by the unbelievers of his particular trajectory to study. So you would find that even in this particular study of yours, your findings may also meet the same resistance from especially those that do not understand the culture from which you are taking your study. But in the context of Zimbabwe, you would realize that the non-traditional religious identity is just a thin layer on everybody's existence. Because basically or primarily your area or the subjects of your study, you have a spiritual identity somehow. It's common. Everyone is a Chihera or MaSibanda or Manzo and everything. We have that kind of spiritual identity. So perhaps maybe to add on that, you need to invest much in conscientizing the recipients of your findings, so that they can be conscious about their already existing but ignored identity of their spirituality. That's my comment.
Yes, thank you so much for that comment. And I would agree with you. I find that it is true. My supervisor has told me that I am in for a fight. But I feel that on some level, for me, I sometimes, I struggle in academia. I don't feel like an academic. I'm an artist, and I'm a simple person. I'm logical, So to me, there's this question of, on the one hand, we are decolonizing, and the whole world is so supportive of us, decolonizing and so on, and all of these things. And then the one place where somehow suddenly it's taboo, it's superstition, it's unscientific, it's rejected, it's anathema, is the place where actually it's the most intimate self. you know? So even when we look at something like, I find so many lies within African studies, you know, within these acceptable discourses, like this idea of oral tradition versus written tradition, which everyone talks about. But in fact, in Zimbabwe, you know, again, I speak most intimately my experience with Shona culture. There's no such thing as oral tradition versus written tradition. Oral tradition is as good or not as good as written tradition. There's a third element, which is what the spirit says, and that is neither oral tradition nor written tradition. It is its own category. Oral tradition is what my grandfather tells me, is some kind of, you know, tradition that is passed on. But when you're in a dare or in a bira, in a ceremony, and the spirit comes and starts telling you your whole history, that is neither one nor the other. And it makes a different impact because you can feel the energy of the communication. It becomes imprinted inside of you. It acknowledges a different faculty than just the brain. So if we in academia, if we at universities cannot actually open up to all of these other faculties, ways of knowing, ways of understanding, ways of learning, then we are not decolonizing. We are not even close. We are all lying to ourselves. And when I say all of us, I mean all of us, because all of humanity comes from these ways of knowing. It's not just in Zimbabwe. So that's my theory. Yeah. Thank you so much. You have been a wonderful audience.
Thank you.